Every day, we wake up to complexity. We get up with our alarm screaming at us, or maybe with a young child screaming at us, and we roll out of bed, and at some point, we're putting on the coffee, we're grabbing breakfast. Often, for many of us, within that morning routine, there is a point where we scroll our phones. We open up our phones. For some of us, this is the first thing we do when we roll out of bed. And immediately, we are bombarded with everything all at once. Everything all at once in the whole world. Everything going on, everything that you're doing wrong. I had no idea how much I was doing wrong until I started scrolling social media. It's amazing. The amount of detergents I should be using and shouldn't be using. All the certain cleaning products that we should be using and not using. Whatever it is, we are bombarded by the things that we are told we need to make our lives easier. And then with all of this coming on to us, we leave the house. We go to our job, or we head over to church or that group, or maybe you don't leave the house, but you spend most of your time staying home. You're managing already the chaos of a home with several kids running around, or you're working from home, still looking at a screen where things are just popping up, telling you what you need, giving you everything at once. In a world where everything is happening all at once, right in front of us, we as Christians are called to the discipline of simplicity. We're in our effort series right now, and we're really looking at spiritual disciplines, ways that we are to put in effort in our faith. Our faith is a faith that requires effort. Now, this is not saying, well, if you don't put in a certain amount of effort, well, God doesn't love you. If you don't cross a certain finish line, you're not truly saved. That's not the kind of effort we are talking about. We're talking about effort required to live in the world that is, but not like the world that is. We're talking about the effort to be closer and closer to the Lord and closer to Jesus in a world that wants to turn us in the other direction. Now, we, especially in our circles of Christianity, of kind of evangelicalism and Protestantism, we tend to have this aversion to effort and action. We tend to think, no, like it is our faith alone and the grace of God alone that saves us. And it is true that it is truly the grace of God that saves us. But effort is not just a convenient outpouring of that grace. It is an outpouring, but it's not just a secondary thing. Effort is not a nice, helpful side dish to grace. Effort comes with grace. Grace we often talk about as the undeserved favor of God. We are not deserving of the favor. We are not deserving of love from God, but He chooses to give it to us anyway. Grace is not an excuse to not put in effort. It is the only reason to put in effort. If we don't have grace, if we don't have forgiveness from God, then the moment we fail, the moment we sin, the moment we fall, the moment we disobey Him, we should just give up. We should just stop putting effort in, because it only takes one failure and He would be done with us. But when we fail, God is not done with us. He calls us to stand back up, to continue to walk with Him, because He loves us and He shows us that grace. So effort is what we do in response to that grace, in response to the second and third and fourth chance that we continuously get all throughout our lives to live with Christ and for Christ. Last week, We heard about solitude and silence. This week we are talking about the discipline of simplicity. Our text picks up in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 10. Now, this was written by the Apostle Paul. Paul wrote a lot of the New Testament, lots of the New Testament letters, and he is writing here to a man named Timothy. Timothy is his protege in a way. He mentors Timothy. Timothy is a young man, given the Greco-Roman culture at the time, to be considered a man but still young. It was probably like early 30s. And Paul was pouring into this young man. And he places him in the Greek city of Ephesus, where Timothy is establishing leaders for the church there. And Paul, throughout this whole letter, has been showing him, just pouring into him this wisdom and knowledge. And here in chapter 6, verses 6 through 10, we read, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that." So there's a contrast here that Paul is making. When you look at the broader context of this text and what he's addressing, he's talking about people that believe that the gospel, that knowing Jesus is a means to financial gain. There were lots of people teaching that back then. There are still lots of people today that teach that now. That, if you love Jesus, if you follow him faithfully enough, you'll get lots of money, you'll always be healthy, but that is not true. Paul is saying godliness is not a means to financial gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain in of itself. He makes this comparison of childbirth and death. Just as children, we come from our mother's wombs naked. We come with nothing. Sure, there's people are born into different families with different levels of status and different levels of wealth. That is certainly a reality. But the baby didn't do anything to receive that situation. A baby comes in with nothing and is fully dependent on those around them. And so in the same way that we come into the world with nothing, we also leave the world with nothing, which means that we cannot live life for something that is so material. We cannot live life for something that doesn't truly bring contentment. We can't live for life for the things that make our lives easier. Instead, we need to live life simply. The bottom line that Paul gives is if we have food and clothing, we can be content with that. Now, that's a pretty low bar. That's a really low bar. Especially in our culture today, we're like, Paul, what are you talking about? Food and clothes, that is a bare minimum. But really, Paul is simply saying that you just need the basic necessities. Everyone that he is writing to here, and even though this was written to Timothy, it would have also been read communally, especially with the church leaders. Everyone he is writing to in this moment would have had these two things. Not all of them necessarily owned property. Some were slaves. Some may have had no home at all. Some of them were rich. Some of them were poor. But all of them had food. If they didn't, they wouldn't be alive to be reading this letter or hearing it be read. And all of them, they were gathering communally. They were also clothed. The bare minimum of what he knew all of them had. So he's not saying, if you have more than this, you're automatically wrong, you're automatically out. But he's saying, hey, I know what you have. And you can be content even with that, even with something so basic and simple. When we think about a simple life and simple faith, one significant group in Christian history. They're known as the Desert Fathers and Mothers, who really live this out. This guy, St. Anthony, or Anthony the Great, was the founder of this order. And one day he read when Jesus told the rich young man, "Sell all you have, give it to the poor, and follow me." He took that to heart. As in, he took it completely literally. He was wealthy. He had some high prestige. So Anthony decided, I'm going to sell everything I have and go out. I heard there's a hermit out in the wilderness somewhere over here, and I'm going to go learn from his teachings and see how, if I can, to live with nothing, to live a life of pure simplicity. And so he did. He sold everything he had. He gave all the money to the poor, and then he reserved a portion of the finances for his sister so that his sister would be cared for, since he was her primary caretaker. And he went off in the wilderness in search of Yoda or something. No, his name was Paul. And I not this Paul that's writing this letter to Timothy. And he finds this hermit in the wilderness, and through his teachings eventually establishes this order that is now known in church history as the Desert Fathers and Mothers. They had no possessions besides the clothes they brought with them to start. They would grow their own crops. They would help people who came through. So they didn't isolate from people necessarily completely. If there were people on the road, they would help them. They would provide for them. They would help each other and serve each other in community. But they had no possessions of their own. There were some subsects of this order that actually even said you couldn't have a Bible because that was a possession that you could potentially idolize. I do think that one is a little far, but you can see the extreme measures that they would go to live this life of simplicity. Eventually, the church developed what's called a monastic lifestyle. So if you've ever heard of monks and nuns, this is where this comes from. It's a more obtainable version of the Desert Father and Mother tradition. Now, this is not to say, and Paul is actually not even saying here, that the solution to breaking from the complexities of life and the material desires is to go off in the wilderness with absolutely nothing and hope to grow your own crops when we live on like a quarry land over here in Sussex. This is not to say that we are supposed to actually literally sell everything we have and live on nothing. We see plenty of examples in Scripture of people who don't take that literally, and Christ still acknowledges their faith. But what we can learn from people like the Desert Fathers and Mothers is the heart of simplicity that they had, the heart of community that they had. Because there's a few things that Paul in this text is not talking about. One is that. But another is he's not saying isolate from others. He's not saying we don't need people. We do need people. We need to gather in community with people. We need to support each other. Again, this letter and other letters that Paul wrote were read communally with a group of people. They would keep each other accountable to the things in these letters. He's not saying, well, self-isolate and be that hermit in the wilderness. Not at all. We need each other. No one can truly be an island. Paul is also not giving an excuse to be lazy. This is about material idolatry, not about work. Oh, because we could say, oh, well, I need to live a simple life. And that means that, well, if I work, I get money. And if I have money, I can buy things. Therefore, work is bad. That's not even close to what this text is saying. And we see from the very beginning in Genesis that we are created to work. There's going to be work in heaven. It won't be cursed, so it'll be good, but there will be work in heaven. So we are designed to work. And if you have a family that you are providing for, you are called to work and provide for them. Whether that is within the home or outside of it, you are called to provide for them. So Paul is not giving an excuse to not work or to be lazy. He is talking about the idolatry, the worship of things that are material. Now, with this contrast that Paul has offered us of this, he also gives an alternative in another letter. In Philippians chapter 4, verses 10 through 11, he writes, "I rejoice greatly in the Lord, that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances." So here Paul is writing to the church in the Greek city of Philippi. He's very close to this church and its leaders. This church, we could call it Paul's church even. Now, he moved around a lot. He traveled a lot. But he first met in the book of Acts, he met the woman Lydia, who had kind of started this church with a group of women, and they worked together to build up this church in Philippi. He's very close to the people in Philippi. So when he's writing their concern for him, they were more on a deeper level than maybe some of the other churches. They were reaching out to Paul. They were making sure he was doing okay. Paul wrote many of his letters in prison as well. They're making sure that he is okay. They're concerned for him. And he thanks them for that concern. But then says, "I'm okay. I rejoice that you were concerned. Thank you for your concern." Or like he's not shutting them down. But he says, "I've learned to be content in all situations, in all things." Contentment is learned. It's not something we can just flip on the switch and say, "Oh, well, I can be content all over the place." This is not something that's going to happen overnight. If you expect this to happen overnight, you are going to be frustrated, you are going to be disappointed, you are going to give up altogether. We need to practice contentment. We need to practice being content in all situations. One of the ways I would encourage us to do this is don't verbalize your discontent. Now, that doesn't mean internally you're not discontent in a certain moment over a certain thing, but practice the discipline of silence and prayer instead when you are discontent. Practice not verbalizing it so much, whether it's to somebody else or yourself. Sometimes you do need to talk about that. Don't shut down again. Don't be an island. But maybe sometimes you need to sit and silently pray and bring that to God instead, so that the words that come out of your mouth don't shape the internal nature of your heart, the internal direction of your heart. Contentment needs to be practiced. It is also not circumstantial. It's not just that, we can be content here and not here. Paul is saying in all things, in all situations, we can be content. If we're content only in good seasons where life is going great, you got the promotion, you got the job, everyone in the family is healthy, but you're not content when things are hard, when things are difficult, when finances are tight, when you don't have everything that you might want or desire, then you weren't truly content in the highs. Now, that doesn't mean we can't struggle in the lows. That doesn't mean that the lows aren't difficult, and we should talk to each other about those lows. But it is possible to be content even in those, in all things. Very practically, when it comes to simplicity, when it comes to contentment, I want us to take one, maybe two things away that we can try, even this week. First thing is very simple, Again, simplicity, but very difficult. 4 words: get off your phone. I struggle with this too. This is not like a judgmental thing. Get off your phone. I woke up this morning knowing I was going to preach this and almost reached over to grab my phone, and I had to physically restrain myself. It is that ingrained into me that I open up my phone and get bombarded with all the things that it's telling me I need. All the things that it's going to make my life better, make my life easier. Or all the things that just are too heavy to bear. Get off your phone. Take a step back from it. Limit your screen time. Have you ever looked at the screen time summary in your settings? If you want to be really upset with yourself, go check that out. It's very depressing. Put your phone down. Even turn it off. Talk to another human being face to face without checking your phone. Looking them in the eye. Be present with another person. I confess, I'm a pastor, and this is hard for me too. I want to think about everything else around me. I want to think about what has to get done. I want to think about, I need this. I'm stressed about this. Narrow in your focus on just one flesh and blood human being right in front of you, silencing the noise. And you'll begin to step into a life of simplicity when the noise is pushed aside. Paul doesn't end there in Philippians 4. He writes on in verses 12 through 13. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Paul knows these things on both extremes. He was in a pretty high position of prestige before he started to be a Christian. He was one of the top guys in the Pharisee order to go and hunt down Christians. He was doing pretty well for himself. And he's also been in prison for the name of Christ that he was originally hunting people down for. He knows both extremes and says that in the extremes we can be content both ways. So simplicity and contentment is not material. It's not like, if you're wealthy, if you're well off, this doesn't apply to you. Sorry, you can't practice simplicity. That's not what this is saying. Simplicity is a posture of contentment of the heart. Simplicity is possible whether you are rich or poor, whether you are sick or if you are healthy. It is a focus on something other than what the world tells us will make our lives better, will make our lives easier. Several years back, I was visiting a church's, they called it a youth service. It was more of a young adult service. It was a lot of early 20s there. And this wasn't a conference. It was mostly people at this church. I was just one of the few visitors. And the speaker, at one point in the message, spent what I believe to be an disproportionate, unnecessary amount of time saying that the car you drive does not determine your value and does not determine how spiritual you are. And I'm sitting here like, duh. I mean, isn't that obvious? You're wasting your time. There's so many more important things we could be talking about. Why are you getting into this? What are we doing? Of course God doesn't care about the car we drive. Let's get on to the good stuff here. And then out in the lobby, as we were leaving, I'm surrounded by these 20-somes. And you know what every single one of them was talking about? Their car. It was like they didn't even hear the message. Every one of them, they were pulling up their cars and showing the engines. I don't understand that at all, but I really didn't understand it now. Right after that, they're talking about their cars. They're talking about gas mileage. I don't. It was bizarre to me, and I drive a 2008 Honda, so it's probably part of it too. And I'm looking around. I said, "Oh my word, this speaker wasn't wasting his time. This speaker knew his audience. He knew who he was talking to. He knew he was talking to a congregation of young adults who genuinely found their value in the vehicle they drive from point A to point B, so much so that they actually didn't hear what he was saying, that they actually went out and based their value on the car they drove, on what seemed to give them status and prestige in their eyes, of what seemed to fill their cup, what seemed to make them content, what made their life better. It doesn't mean that you can't have a nice car. It doesn't mean that you can't have nice things. But I saw that night the hearts of so many people around me because their first foot forward was something material. That when they die, just as the way they came, they are not taking with them. And when that is the focus of your life, it is a life that is sadly wasted. Paul writes here in this text, I can do all this. He's talking about contentment. I can do all this through Christ who strengthens me. Now this verse is probably the most ripped out of context verse in the whole Bible. You see this at Christian gyms. It's not totally a thing, but if you go to Bible colleges, Christian gyms, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's I can run this marathon because of Christ who strengthens me. I can hit this 3-point shot because it is Christ who strengthens me. I can bench, I don't actually know what's a lot, but I can bench a lot because of Christ who strengthens. I think that's a squat, not a bench, actually. Because of Christ who strengthens me. But it's not about the things we can accomplish because Christ is powerful. Yes, he is powerful. But Paul is talking about, I can be content in all these things. I can do all of this because of Christ who gives me strength. Simplicity that brings contentment is possible only because Christ strengthens us. The world gives us so many other messages about what we need and what we need to make our life easier, that it takes the power of God to override that, to push against that. It is only by the strength and power of Christ that we can do all these things and be in all these places, in all these seasons of life, living simple and content lives. We must abide in him as our primary focus, as the noise is drowned out, as he sits at the center of our lives, not the top of a priority list, the center of our lives, giving us strength for simplicity. Now, I've been talking about all these things that the world promises will make our lives easier. But simplicity does not mean easy. Simplicity is good. But simplicity is hard. Sometimes we need to give up what will make our lives easier in favor of what will make our lives simple, in favor of what God has for us that is good. As I invite the worship team up here this morning, I talked earlier about the Desert Fathers and the Desert Mothers a little bit, and St. Anthony, this founder of them. And St. Anthony reported that After years of being in the wilderness with nothing but still the same clothes that he brought the years prior, and the crops that he was growing, and the new disciples that he had kind of made to worship and follow Jesus in that context, he reported having a vision from the Lord. This is documented in by church historians and things like that. And he said that in his vision, God told him, I have found somebody just like you. I want to show you somebody just like you. And this man in the wilderness with nothing to his name is shown a vision of a physician in the city, meeting with people and working with medicine. And God is saying to him, just because he has something, it doesn't mean that he is not living this life of simplicity and contentment that is focused on me. I think a lot of us are actually the physician here. And not that you're a doctor or that we have all those degrees and those credentials, but a lot of us are just living in the world that is. We're not separating. We're not going and living under the bridge over here. We're just going through the ins and outs of life, desiring God. The two men, Anthony and the man that God shows him, could not have been more different in the way they expressed their faith, in the way that they expressed the discipline of simplicity. And yet they both did. And so wherever you are, wealthy, poor, stable, unstable, you can be content in a life that is simple